I discovered that my husband was digging my own grave in the back of our yard, and he did this every single dawn for weeks while I slept beside him without suspecting a thing. My name is Dorothy. I'm 76 years old today, and this story I'm about to tell you happened 61 years ago when I was only 35 years old. I lived on a small farm in rural Kentucky with my husband Ernest. We didn't have children, we never could, and back then, that was a source of shame for me. The neighbor women would whisper behind my back, saying I was barren, that I wasn't even good enough to give my husband a child. But today, looking back, I thank God every single day that I never had any children with that man. Because if I had kids, maybe I wouldn't be here today telling you this story. Before I continue, I wanted to ask something from those of you watching right now. If you're enjoying this story, leave a like down below on the video. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people. Subscribe too so you don't miss the next videos, because I have many stories from my life to tell. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. What city? What state? I love knowing who's on the other side of the screen listening to this, Grandma. Well, back to my story. It was July 1962. I remember the exact month because I had just had my birthday. I had turned 35 on July 12th. And it was right after my birthday that everything started. Back then, life in the countryside was very different from today. We didn't have television, we didn't have a phone, we didn't have any of these modern things you have now. We woke up with the sunrise and went to sleep when it got dark, because we only had electricity in the living room and bedroom. The rest of the house was lit with kerosene lamps. Our farm was tiny, just about 7 acres. We had a small vegetable garden, some fruit trees, some chickens I raised, and Ernest worked at Mr. Augustus's general store in town, about 2.5 miles away. He left every morning at 6 a.m. and came back around 6 p.m. I stayed alone all day long, taking care of the house, the chickens, the garden, washing clothes, cooking on the wood stove. It was a simple life, but I didn't complain. I thought that's how it had to be, that this was a married woman's destiny. Ernest was never an affectionate man, you know? He wasn't one of those husbands who came home and kissed his wife, asked how her day was, those things. He was dry, quiet, kind of closed off. But I had gotten used to his ways. We had been married for 12 years, me at 23 and him at 28. And in all that time, I learned that men were just like that there was no point expecting too much affection, that what mattered was having food on the table and a roof over your head. But that July of '62, something changed, and it all started with something so small, so silly, that anyone would think I was making up problems where there weren't any. It all started with wet dirt. It was on a Thursday morning. I remember because every Thursday I would kill a chicken to cook for Sunday lunch. So I always woke up earlier on that day to choose which chicken would be sacrificed. It must have been around 5:30 a.m. when I got up from bed. Ernest was still sleeping, snoring softly, like he always did. I put on my robe over my nightgown, slipped on my flip-flops, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. The kitchen was in the back of the house, and to get there, I had to pass by the back door, that door that led to the yard, where we left work shoes, tools, those things. And it was there when I passed by that door that I saw it for the first time. Ernest's work shoes were thrown in the corner like he always left them when he came home from work. They were old shoes, dark brown, kind of worn, with the soles already needing replacement. But that morning there was something different about those shoes. The soles were covered in dirt, fresh dirt, damp, caked on, really wet dirt, you know? You could see the little pieces of red clay stuck in the grooves of the rubber. I stopped there, looking at those shoes, and found it very strange, because it had been more than 3 weeks since a drop of rain had fallen in that region. The ground was bone dry, cracked, hard. I myself had to carry buckets of water to water the garden every single day, because otherwise the vegetables would die from how dry the soil was. And there were my husband's shoes, dirty with wet, fresh dirt, as if he had stepped in a puddle. But I didn't say anything. You know how it is? A married woman back then couldn't ask her husband too many questions. Otherwise, he'd think you were suspicious of him, that you were being troublesome. So I just cleaned his shoes with an old rag, wiped off all that dirt, and went to make coffee. When Ernest woke up and came to the kitchen, I served his coffee with milk, the bread with butter that I made myself. And we had coffee in silence, as always. He was never one to talk in the morning. He'd finish eating, grab the lunch I prepared for him, put on his shoes, and leave for work, barely saying anything, just a dry "see you later" before leaving. That day went by normally. I did all my chores, took care of the chickens, watered the garden, washed clothes, hung them on the line, swept the house, made lunch. When 6 p.m. came, Ernest arrived from work, as always, tired, sweaty, with that closed-off face of someone who had a hard day. He had dinner, took a bath, and went to sleep early, because he had to wake up early the next day again. But the next morning, when I woke up and passed by the back door, I saw it again. His shoes were dirty with wet dirt. Again, fresh, damp dirt, stuck to the sole, as if he had walked on soft ground during the night. This time I stood there longer, looking at those shoes. I kept thinking, trying to understand how the dirt was wet if it hadn't rained, where that dirt had come from. Had he gone out at night and I hadn't noticed? But why? Where would he have gone in the middle of the night? I crouched down and picked up one of the shoes. I ran my finger over the sole. The dirt was really fresh, you could feel the moisture, and it wasn't just dirt. There were little pieces of dry leaves stuck there too, as if he had walked in the woods in a place with vegetation. That's when I started noticing other things. His fingernails. When he came back from the store that afternoon, his fingernails were dirty with dark dirt, black, almost under his nails, and his hands were also kind of rough, as if he had grabbed something heavy, wood or iron maybe. That night, I couldn't sleep right. I lay there, eyes closed, but my mind was racing. And that's when I noticed. Around 3 a.m., I felt Ernest get up from bed. He got up very slowly, carefully, like someone who doesn't want to wake the other person. I heard him getting dressed in the dark. I heard when he left the room barefoot, carrying his shoes in his hand. My heart started beating faster. I stayed lying down, pretending I was sleeping, but paying attention to every little sound. I heard when he put on his shoes in the kitchen. I heard when the back door creaked softly, and then silence. A silence that left me with a chill in my stomach. I stayed there motionless, counting the minutes in my head. How long would he be gone? Where had he gone? What was he doing in the middle of the night? An hour passed, then another half hour. I was almost getting up from bed to go see what was happening when I heard it. The back door creaking again, his footsteps in the kitchen, the sound of him taking off his shoes. He came back to the room, walking slowly, still with that care of someone who doesn't want to make noise. He lay down on the bed very gently and stayed quiet. I smelled it then, a smell of damp earth, of woods, of sweat, and a faint smell of kerosene, that smell of the lamp we used for light. He had taken the lamp, had gone somewhere that needed light. The next morning, I didn't say anything. I got up, went to the kitchen, and there were the shoes again, dirty with wet dirt, much dirtier than the previous days. There was dirt stuck everywhere, not just on the sole, on the sides of the shoe, on the top, as if he had stepped deep in soft earth, as if he had been in a place with a lot of disturbed soil. And that's the day I noticed something else. The shovel we used to plant vegetables in the garden, that shovel with a wooden handle that was always leaning against the wall in the back, was gone. I looked all morning and couldn't find it. Where was that shovel? When Ernest came back from work that afternoon, I tried to ask casually, without seeming like I was suspicious of anything. "Ernest, did you see the shovel that was in the back? I need it to work on the garden, but I can't find it." He looked at me with those dark eyes of his, and I saw something in that look that made me tremble inside. It wasn't anger. It wasn't irritation. It was a coldness I had never seen in him before. "Leave that shovel alone, Dorothy. I'm using it for something." "For what? Can I know?" "It's none of your business. A wife doesn't need to know everything her husband does." and he turned his back and left to the bedroom, ending the conversation in that dry way of his. But that response, that manner of his, that kept hammering in my head. He was using the shovel for something. What thing? And why couldn't he tell me? The days went by, and it repeated every single morning. Wet dirt on the shoes always. And he kept going out at dawn, every single dawn, 3 o'clock, like clockwork. I pretended I was sleeping, but now I stayed awake waiting, paying attention. He'd get up, get dressed, grab something in the kitchen, and leave. He always came back about 2 hours later, tired, smelling of earth and sweat. And the worst of all is that he was changing toward me, becoming colder and more distant. Before he at least talked about something at dinner, asked if anything had happened during the day, those routine things. But now he barely looked at me, ate in silence, took a bath, and went to sleep. And when I tried to start a conversation, he'd respond with monosyllables, with that closed-off face that made it clear he didn't want to talk. It was on a Saturday afternoon. It must have been about 2 weeks since all this had started, that I went to the chicken coop to get eggs and found the shovel. It was hidden behind the chicken coop, leaning against the wall, covered with an old burlap sack. And when I looked at that shovel, I saw that the handle was different. The handle was new. He had changed the shovel's handle. Why? The old handle was fine. It wasn't broken. Why did he change it? I picked up the shovel and examined it. The new handle was good wood, strong wood, thicker than the old handle. And the shovel blade was clean. But I saw the marks of use, those marks from when you dig hard earth, you know? The shovel was being used a lot to dig something. I was standing there, holding that shovel and trying to understand what was happening when I heard his voice behind me. "I told you to leave that shovel alone." I turned around, startled. Ernest was there at the chicken coop door, looking at me with a face that scared me. A fear I had never felt of him before. "I was just looking for it to work on the garden," I stammered. "You're not going to work on anything with that shovel. That shovel is mine. Leave it where it is and don't touch it again." He grabbed the shovel from my hand with a brusque gesture and covered it back with the burlap sack. Then he looked at me with those cold eyes and spoke very quietly, very slowly, in a way that gave me chills. "And don't go snooping in my things, Dorothy. A wife who snoops too much ends up discovering what she shouldn't." That was a threat. I felt it was a threat. And at that moment, standing there in the chicken coop with my husband looking at me that way, I felt fear. Real fear. Fear of him. After that day at the chicken coop, I started walking on eggshells inside my own house. I was afraid to do anything that would irritate Ernest, afraid to ask anything, afraid even to look at him the wrong way. And that consumed me inside, because I started living with a lump in my throat, with that bad feeling that something very wrong was happening, but I didn't know what. His dawn outings continued. Every night, 3 a.m., he'd get up and leave, and I kept pretending I was sleeping, but actually I lay there, tense, counting the minutes until he came back. It was always 2 hours, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, but on average 2 hours he was gone. And when he came back, that smell of damp earth, of woods, of sweat, came with him. I started having insomnia. I spent the whole day tired, dragging myself around, because at night I couldn't really sleep. I stayed in that state of alert, waiting for him to get up, waiting for the door to creak, waiting for him to come back. And during the day, I looked at him, trying to understand who this man I had married 12 years ago was. Did I really know him? Because the man who was sharing the bed with me now seemed like a stranger. It was on a Sunday afternoon that Judith showed up at my house. Judith was my neighbor and my friend since childhood. We had grown up together in that region. She lived with her husband and 3 children on a farm about 500 yards from ours. We always visited each other, had coffee at each other's houses, talked about life things. She was the only real friend I had. That Sunday, Ernest had gone to town to play pool at Joe's bar, so I was alone at home when Judith arrived. She brought a pound cake she had made and came to have coffee with me. We sat on the porch, and she kept looking at me strangely while we ate the cake. "Dorothy, are you okay?" she asked suddenly, with that worried voice of hers. "I am." "Why do you ask?" I tried to hide it, but my voice came out shaky. "It's just that you look terrible, honey. Deep, dark circles, thin. Looks like you're not sleeping right. Is something happening?" I stayed quiet, not knowing what to say. I wanted to vent, to tell her everything, but at the same time I was afraid. Afraid to talk and seem crazy. Afraid of Ernest finding out I was talking about him with the neighbor. Afraid of everything. But Judith was smart. She noticed my hesitation and moved closer to me, took my hand and spoke softly. "Dorothy, I need to tell you something, and you can't be mad at me, okay? I'm telling you this because I care about you." My heart raced. What was she going to say? "You can tell me, Judith." She took a deep breath before continuing. "I'm not sleeping well at night. You know how it is. Menopause is tormenting me. I wake up several times during the night with those hot flashes. And when I wake up, I stand at my bedroom window, getting some fresh air, looking outside, trying to cool down. And it's from my window that I see your yard." She paused, looked around to make sure no one was nearby, and continued. "Dorothy, it's been about 3 weeks, maybe a month, that I've been seeing Ernest leaving at dawn every single day. 3 a.m., like clockwork, he leaves through the back door with a lit lamp in his hand. He crosses your yard and goes to that back area, you know? That part that has a lot of woods that we don't even use. He goes into the woods and stays there. About 2 hours later, he comes back." I felt my blood freeze in my veins, so it wasn't my imagination. He really was going out. And Judith was seeing it. Someone else was seeing it. "And are you sure it's him?" I asked, still wanting to believe it might be a mistake. "I'm sure, Dorothy. From my window, I can see the light of his lamp clearly. And yesterday, I saw something that worried me even more. He was carrying something heavy. It looked like a bucket, and he also had your shovel." "Dorothy, what is your husband doing in the woods at dawn with a shovel and bucket?" I didn't know what to answer. I stood there holding the coffee cup with my hands shaking, feeling tears burning in my eyes, but holding myself back from crying. "I don't know, Judith. I swear to God I don't know. He won't tell me anything, and when I ask, he gets angry. Says it's none of my business." Judith squeezed my hand hard. "Dorothy, you need to be careful. A man who hides things from his wife, who goes out at dawn without explanation, that's not normal. Do you think it could be another woman? Could he be meeting someone out there in the woods?" I had thought about that. I had thought about the possibility of it being an affair, but it didn't make sense. If he was meeting a woman, he'd leave the house clean, dressed up, smelling good. He wouldn't come back dirty with earth, tired, with hurt hands. No, it wasn't another woman. It was something else, something worse. I felt that in the depths of my soul. "I don't know, Judith, but I'm scared, very scared." She stayed with me a while longer. We talked about other things to cover up, but when she left, that conversation kept echoing in my head. 3 weeks, maybe a month. She had been seeing him leave all this time, and he was taking a shovel and bucket to do what? Dig what? That night, when Ernest came back from the bar, he was different. He was more talkative, almost animated, which was strange because he was never like that. He had dinner, took a bath, and when he came to the living room where I was mending clothes, he sat in the chair across from me and just looked at me. "Dorothy, I need to know something." My heart jumped. The way he said it, serious, those eyes fixed on me gave me a chill. "What thing?" "That life insurance your father left you when he died. Is it still valid?" My father had died 5 years earlier, in 1957. He was a retired railroad worker and had a small life insurance policy he had taken out through the union. When he died, the insurance paid some money to me, since I was an only child. It wasn't a fortune, but it was good money. Along with some savings he had put away, it was enough to buy a nice house in town if I wanted. But I had left it all saved, invested in a savings account my father had opened for me before he died. "It is. Why do you want to know?" "It's good to know these things, Dorothy. We never know what tomorrow brings, right? If something happens to you, I need to know where the papers are, where that money is kept. It would be good if you showed me where you keep these things. The way he said that tone of voice, that coldness. If something happens to you, not if something happens to us, it was with you, with me. The papers are kept in a safe place. If needed, I'll show you. No, Dorothy, I want you to show me now, right now. It wasn't a request, it was an order, and there was something in his manner, in his posture, that told me it was better to obey. So I got up, went to the bedroom, opened the wardrobe, and took out from inside an old shoebox all the documents, the insurance policy, the savings account statement, the farm deed that was in my name, because it had been my father's inheritance. He took the papers from my hand and examined them one by one, slowly, reading each line. And while he read, I saw that expression on his face. It wasn't curiosity, it was calculation. He was calculating something. How much is in the savings account? He asked, without taking his eyes off the paper. There's the amount my father left, plus the interest from these 5 years. It should be around $15,000 now. At the time, it was considerable money. It wasn't enough to get rich, but enough to live comfortably for a good while, enough to buy a house and still have some left over. And if you die, who gets this money? The question froze me. If you die. Again, he was talking about my death. Why was he so interested in this? It goes to my husband, to you, I answered, feeling my voice tremble. He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already knew. Then he folded the papers, gave them back to me and said, "Keep this well kept, it's important." And he went to sleep. Went to sleep as if he hadn't just asked questions about my death, about the money he'd receive if I died, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, with my heart pounding, thinking about that conversation, thinking about the wet dirt on the shoes, thinking about the dawn outings, thinking about the shovel, thinking about everything. And the pieces started to fit together in my head in a way that filled me with dread. In the following days, I started paying attention to things that before went unnoticed. I started observing the yard with different eyes, and that's when I realized there was a part of the yard way in the back that Ernest never let me get close to. It was an area with a lot of brush, some banana trees, some papaya trees, all kind of neglected, kind of abandoned. And every time I talked about cleaning that area, about pulling out the brush to plant something useful, he was categorical. "Leave that alone, Dorothy. That corner has snakes. It's dangerous. You don't go there." Before I obeyed without questioning, but now, after everything, that took on a different meaning. Why didn't he want me to go there? What was in that corner of the yard that he was so interested in keeping me away from? One day when he was at work, I decided to go there. My heart was pounding, my legs were shaking, but I needed to see, needed to know. I crossed the yard, past the chickens, and walked slowly to that brushy area. When I got close, I saw that in the middle of the brush there was a path that didn't exist before, a path that had been opened recently because the vegetation on the sides was all crushed, trampled. Someone had passed there many times, always in the same place, and had created a path. I started following that path, pushing aside branches, leaves, stepping slowly to not make noise. I don't know exactly why, but I felt I needed to be silent. The path wound between the banana trees, getting more closed in, darker, until it reached a point where there was a small clearing. And in that clearing on the ground, I saw marks in the earth. The earth was disturbed, different from the rest. It was looser, darker, as if someone had dug there. But there was no hole, nothing, just the disturbed earth. Was he planting something there? But what? And why hidden? Why couldn't he tell me? I stood there, looking at that disturbed earth, trying to understand when I heard a noise behind me. I turned, startled, and came face to face with Ernest. He had come back from work early and was standing there, looking at me with an expression on his face that made me want to run. "What are you doing here, Dorothy?" I was just... I couldn't finish the sentence. He approached me slowly, with heavy steps, eyes fixed on mine. Didn't I tell you not to come here? Didn't I tell you it's dangerous? Sorry, Ernest. I was just curious. Curiosity killed the cat, Dorothy. Did you know that? The way he said that, with that low tone, almost whispering, made me shake all over. It wasn't a joke. It was a threat, a clear threat. Go back to the house now and don't come back here ever again. Never again. Do you understand? I ran out of there, stumbling over branches, with my heart about to burst out of my chest. And when I got to the house, I locked the kitchen door and stood there leaning against it, crying, shaking, more scared than I had ever been in my entire life. That night, he didn't have dinner with me. He stayed outside until late, sitting on the porch, smoking cigarette after cigarette, something he didn't normally do. I stayed in the kitchen pretending I was busy, but actually I was terrified. When he finally came in, took a bath, and went to sleep, I lay down next to him, but didn't close my eyes. And when it struck 3 a.m., he got up as always and left. But this time, when he left, I got up too. Very carefully, very slowly, I went to the bedroom window that faced the back and watched. I saw the light of his lamp crossing the yard. I saw when he entered that path in the brush and saw when the light stopped there in the clearing. He stayed there for 2 hours doing what? Digging, burying something? What? The days went by and the situation became more and more unbearable. He barely spoke to me. When he came home from work, he'd eat in silence, take a bath, and go to sleep. And every dawn he left, every single dawn, like clockwork. And I lay there in the dark, terrified, imagining the worst. There was a day I was washing clothes and found his shirt all dirty with earth. It wasn't just a little dirt. It was a lot of dirt caked on the fabric, on the sleeves, on the chest, as if he had dragged himself on the ground or dug with such force that the dirt had splattered all over him. And his hands were getting full of new calluses, of blisters that burst and became wounds, hands of someone who was working hard, digging, grabbing shovel handles, exerting force. But his work at Mr. Augustus's store wasn't manual labor. It was counter work, serving customers, writing sales in a ledger. Where did those calluses come from? One night, about 10 days after that conversation about the insurance, he came home with a strange face, a face I couldn't decipher. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness. It was a mix of tiredness with determination, as if he had made an important decision. He had dinner in silence, as always, but when he finished eating, instead of going to take a bath, he sat there at the table, looking at me, and then said, "Dorothy, is your sister in good health?" The question caught me by surprise. He never asked about my sister Margaret, who lived in Louisville with her husband and 2 children. She is. At least the last time she sent a letter she was. It's been a while since you visited her, hasn't it? About 6 months. Don't you think you should go there and spend a few days with her? Sisters need to see each other from time to time. That was so strange. He had never cared about my visits to Margaret. In fact, he always complained when I talked about traveling. He said I had obligations at home, that I couldn't just leave. And now, out of nowhere, he was suggesting I go. You want me to go visit Margaret? Yeah, I think it would be good. You've been very nervous lately, very stressed. A few days away from here will do you good. There was something behind that, some reason he wasn't saying. Why did he want to send me away? Why did he want me to leave the house? And that's when it all clicked in my head. That's when I understood. He wanted me to leave. He wanted the house empty. He was planning something and needed me not to be there. And the way he spoke, the way he looked at me, that filled me with a terror I can't explain. At that moment, I was absolutely certain of one thing. My life was in danger. I didn't know exactly what Ernest was planning. I didn't understand all the details yet, but I knew he was plotting something against me, and that if I left that house, if I went to visit my sister as he was suggesting, something terrible was going to happen. It was there, sitting at that table, with my husband looking at me with those cold eyes, that I made the most important decision of my life. I wasn't going to wait to find out what he was planning. I was going to find out first. I was going to pretend I was leaving, but stay nearby, hidden, watching, and see with my own eyes what he was doing in that brush every dawn. Because if I didn't do this, if I didn't discover the truth, I was certain I wouldn't survive. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark with my eyes open, listening to Ernest's breathing beside me and planning every detail of what I was going to do. My head was buzzing, my heart beating so hard I thought he'd hear it. But I needed to stay calm, needed to think straight, because if I made a mistake, if he discovered what I was planning, I didn't know what he was capable of doing to me. When the day dawned, I got up and did everything as always, made coffee, served him, acted normal. And when he was finishing eating before leaving for work, I spoke with the most natural voice I could manage. "Ernest, I thought about what you said yesterday about me going to visit Margaret. I think you're right. It's been a long time since I've seen my sister. I'm going to send her a letter today, letting her know I'm coming next week." I saw his eyes light up. It was quick, just a second, but I saw satisfaction, relief, as if it was exactly what he wanted to hear. "I think it's a good idea, Dorothy. It'll do you good." "How many days do you plan to stay?" "About 3 days, maybe 4. Depends on how Margaret needs help." "No problem. I'll manage here alone those days." And he left for work with a lighter step, almost animated. That confirmed everything I was thinking. He wanted me to leave. He was waiting for me to leave. And that could only mean one thing. He was planning to do something while I was away, something he couldn't do with me around. As soon as he left, I locked all the doors, closed all the windows, and ran to Judith's house. I knocked on her door desperately, and when she opened and saw my face, she didn't even need to ask anything. She pulled me inside and closed the door. "What happened, Dorothy? You're white as a sheet." I sat at her kitchen table and told her everything. Told her about the insurance questions, about him suggesting I travel, about the wet dirt, about the path in the brush, about everything. And the more I spoke, the more frightened Judith's face became. "My God in heaven, Dorothy, do you think he's wanting to—" She didn't finish the sentence, but we knew what she was thinking. "I don't know what he's wanting, Judith, but I know it's something bad, very bad, and I need to find out what it is before it's too late." "And what are you going to do?" I took a deep breath before speaking. "I'm going to pretend I'm traveling. I'll tell him I'm leaving tomorrow morning to catch the 5 a.m. bus, but I won't. I'm going to hide here at your house if you'll let me. And at dawn, when he leaves, like he always does, I'm going to follow him. I'm going to see what he's doing out there in the brush." Judith looked at me scared, and I saw when she was going to say it was dangerous, that it was crazy. But before she could say anything, I held her hand and said, "Judith, if I don't do this, if I don't find out what he's plotting, I'm afraid of what might happen to me. You're my only friend, my only hope. For God's sake, help me." She squeezed my hand back, and I saw tears in her eyes. "Okay, Dorothy, you can stay here hidden, but promise me you'll be careful, very careful." I went back home more relieved. At least I had Judith on my side. I spent the rest of the day pretending normalcy, doing my chores, but inside I was a nervous wreck. Every hour I'd go to the window, look at that back area of the yard where the path was. I tried to see something, but during the day you couldn't see anything. It was all too closed in, too hidden by the brush. When Ernest came home from work that afternoon, I was prepared. I had mentally rehearsed what I was going to say, how I was going to act. He came in, and before he even asked, I was already talking. "Ernest, I sent word with Mr. Thompson, who passes through Louisville every week. I told Margaret I'm going tomorrow. I'm going to catch the 5 a.m. bus, so I'll have to leave here at 4:30 to get to the bus station on time." "Tomorrow already?" he asked, and I saw that gleam in his eyes again, that barely disguised satisfaction. "Yeah, the sooner the better, right? That way I'll really enjoy the days there." "That's right." "Want me to take you to the bus station?" "No need. You have to work tomorrow morning. I'll walk. It's not far." "Are you sure?" "I am." He was satisfied with that. He ate well that night. He was even talking more than normal, asking questions about Margaret, about the trip. And I answered everything naturally, pretending I was excited about the trip, when inside my stomach was churning with nerves. After dinner, I went to the bedroom and started packing a small suitcase with some clothes. I left the suitcase there very visible, leaning against the wall, for him to see that I was really preparing to travel. And when I lay down that night, I forced myself to stay still, to breathe slowly, to pretend I was sleeping peacefully, like a person who was traveling the next day. But I didn't sleep. How could I sleep? I lay there in the dark, tense, waiting. And when it struck 3 a.m., as always, I felt him get up, but this time it was different. He didn't get up with that usual care. He got up faster, more decisive. He lit the kerosene lamp right there in the bedroom, got dressed without worrying about being quiet. And as he was leaving, he stopped at the door, looked at me lying there, and stared at me for a time that seemed like an eternity. I had my eyes closed, pretending to sleep, but I felt the weight of that look on me. And there was a moment I thought he had discovered, that he knew I was awake, that I was pretending. But after a few seconds that seemed like hours, he left. I waited for him to leave the house. I waited a few more minutes to be sure he had really gone. And then I got up, grabbed the suitcase I had packed, put on a dark dress, tied a scarf on my head, and left through the front door very slowly, very slowly. The dawn was dark, no moon. There were only stars in the sky, and that heavy silence that exists at dawn in the countryside. I crossed the yard running, crouched down, afraid he was watching, afraid he was somewhere observing. I got to Judith's house and knocked on the door softly. She was already awake waiting for me and pulled me inside quickly. "Did he leave?" she whispered. "He did. Now we wait until close to 5 a.m., which is when I was supposed to catch the bus. Then I leave through the front of your house with the suitcase, walking toward town, so if he's watching from afar, he'll see that I really left." We stayed there in her kitchen, in the dark, with just a little candle lit, talking softly, waiting for time to pass. Judith's husband and children were sleeping, so we had to be quiet. And in those 2 hours of waiting, I felt a fear I had never felt before, a fear that consumed me inside, that made my whole body shake. "What if he does something to you, when you go follow him?" Judith asked, holding my hand. "I'll be careful. I'll stay far away, just watching. I just need to see what he's doing out there. I need to understand." When the living room clock showed 10 to 5, I grabbed my suitcase, opened Judith's front door, and started walking down the road that led to town. I walked about 100 yards, always looking back, always alert. If Ernest was watching from somewhere, he'd see me leaving, see that I was going away, like I had said. After those 100 yards, I hid the suitcase behind a big bush on the side of the road and ran back to Judith's house. I entered through the back door this time and stayed there hidden in her little room, that small room with a window that overlooked our yard. "Now we wait," I told Judith. "He'll come back from the brush soon. Go into the house and see that I'm not there anymore, that I already left to catch the bus, and then he'll think I'm gone." And that's exactly what happened. Around 5:30 a.m., I saw the light of his lamp coming from the back of the yard. I saw him entering through the back door of the house, and after about 10 minutes, I saw him leaving again, already dressed up, in clean clothes, going to work as always. But his way of walking was different. It was lighter, looser, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He believed it. He believed I had left. "And now?" Judith asked. "Now we wait until tonight, until tomorrow dawn. I need to see what he does when he thinks he's alone, when he thinks there's no one to see." That day was the longest day of my life. I stayed hidden in Judith's little room all day long, unable to leave, unable to do anything. I just looked out the window, watching my house, watching the yard, waiting for Ernest to come back from work. Judith brought me food, water, stayed talking with me softly so I wouldn't go crazy with nerves. When it struck 6 p.m. and I saw Ernest arriving from work, my heart raced. I saw him entering the house, turning on the lights. I saw him going back and forth through the rooms. He seemed to be looking for something or checking if there really wasn't anyone there. After a while, I saw him leaving through the back door, and this time he was carrying some things with him. He had the shovel, a big bucket, and something else I couldn't identify from afar. He went straight to that path in the brush and stayed there. He stayed there until it got completely dark, until you couldn't see anything anymore. "Dorothy, are you sure you want to do this?" Judith asked when she saw me getting ready, putting on dark clothes, tying my hair back. "I'm sure. If I don't find out what he's doing, I'll never have peace, never be able to go back home, never be able to sleep peacefully. I need to know." Judith's husband had come back from work, and she had told him everything. Mr. Oliver was a good man, hard-working, and when he found out about my situation, he offered to go with me. "No, Mr. Oliver. If he sees a man following him, he'll suspect, he'll react. But if he sees me, if I get caught, I can say I came back from the trip early, that I came to see something. It's less dangerous this way." It wasn't. I knew it wasn't, but I couldn't risk putting someone else in danger. This was between me and Ernest. When it struck 10 p.m., I saw the lights in my house go out. He had gone to sleep, or at least that's what it seemed. And then began the most agonizing wait of my life. I stayed there at the window, looking at that dark house, waiting for 3 a.m. to come. Judith stayed awake with me. We didn't talk, just sat there in the dark waiting. And I prayed. I prayed softly, asking God to protect me, asking Our Lady to give me strength, asking for nothing bad to happen to me. When the clock struck 3, I saw the back door of my house opening, the light of the lamp appearing, and Ernest's silhouette leaving with the shovel in hand and the bucket. He crossed the yard and entered that path in the brush. "Now," I told Judith, "now I'm going." "For God's sake, Dorothy, be careful," she whispered, and I saw she was crying. I left through Judith's back door and started crossing her yard toward my yard. My heart was beating so hard I thought I was going to faint. My legs were shaking so much I could barely walk. But I kept going, kept walking slowly, very slowly, stepping carefully to not make noise. I got to the boundary between the yards and jumped over the low wire fence that separated the properties. I fell on the other side and stayed crouched there for a few moments, waiting, listening. Nothing. Just the sound of crickets, cicadas, the wind in the leaves. I started crossing my own yard, feeling like an intruder, feeling as if I was invading a place that wasn't mine. I passed the chickens sleeping on their perch, past the garden, past the area I knew until I got to that back part, that forbidden part. I saw the entrance to the path in the brush and saw way in the back a dim light, the light of his lamp. He was there, and I was going to find out what. I entered the path walking on tiptoe, holding my breath, afraid to step on a branch and make noise. The path was narrow, closed in on both sides with vegetation. There were banana trees, brush, vines, and the further I went, the darker it got, because the plants closed over, making a kind of green tunnel. I walked slowly, very slowly, always with my eyes on the light up ahead. The light stayed still in one place. He was stopped, doing something. What? The closer I got, the more I could hear. There was a rhythmic noise, a noise of metal hitting earth. The shovel. He was digging something. I got close enough to see through the banana tree leaves. I crouched down, hid behind a big banana tree, and looked. And what I saw made my blood freeze in my veins. There on the ground of that small clearing was a hole, a big hole, very big. And Ernest was inside that hole. He was inside, only his head and shoulders showing above ground, digging, throwing dirt up with the shovel. And the hole was deep, very deep. I put my hand over my mouth to not scream. My legs buckled, and I almost fell right there. Because I understood at that moment, in that horrible instant, I understood everything. That hole was the size of a person, the length of a person lying down, and the width of a person, and the depth. The depth was of a grave, of a cemetery grave. He was digging a grave to bury me. I stood there paralyzed, watching him dig, watching him stop from time to time, grab the bucket of water and throw it on the earth at the bottom to soften it, to make it easier to dig. That's why the dirt was always wet on his shoes. That's why he did this every dawn. He was digging my grave, was preparing the place where he was going to bury me. He had sent me traveling because he thought that when I came back, he'd already have everything ready. He'd already be able to execute his plan, kill me, bury me there. And no one would ever know where I was. I would simply disappear and he'd keep my money, my insurance, everything. And it was at that moment, watching him there inside that hole, that I heard it. I heard him talking to himself, speaking softly, but I could hear because the silence of the dawn let sounds travel. One more day, just one more day, and it's ready. Then when she comes back, I'll solve this once and for all. Dorothy disappears. No one ever finds her, and I keep everything. I'll go to another city, start life over. No one will suspect anything. The tears ran burning down my face. I had been married to that man for 12 years. 12 years. I had taken care of him, washed his clothes, made food for him, shared a bed with him, and there he was, digging my grave, planning my murder, talking about making me disappear, as if I was less than nothing. I don't know how I managed to go back. I don't know how my legs carried me back through the path, through the yard, to Judith's house. When I came in through the back door, Judith saw me and screamed softly, because I must have looked horrible. "My God, Dorothy, what happened? What did you see?" I fell on the floor right there, sobbing, shaking all over. And when I could speak, when I could tell her what I had seen, Judith turned white, white as a sheet. "We need to do something now. We need to call someone. We need—" "Pastor Mitchell," I said between sobs. "We need to go to Pastor Mitchell. He's the only person people respect, who they'll believe. We need to go now, Judith, before dawn, before it's too late." And that's what we did. In the middle of that dawn, Judith and I left down the dark road, running, stumbling, desperate, to Pastor Mitchell's house, which was next to the church in town. And when we knocked on his door, when he opened and saw two desperate women at his door at dawn, he knew it was serious, very serious. When Pastor Mitchell opened the door and saw us there, two women in the middle of the night, with desperate faces, our clothes all dirty with earth, our eyes swollen from crying so much, he didn't even need to ask if it was serious. He knew. He saw on our faces that it was a matter of life and death. Come in quickly," he said, looking around to see if anyone on the street was watching. "What's happening?" We entered the parsonage and he closed the door carefully. He led me to a chair because I could barely stand. My legs had turned to jelly, my whole body was shaking, and I felt like I was going to throw up any moment from nerves. Judith stayed by my side, holding my hand, and she was the one who started telling. "Pastor Mitchell, Dorothy's life is in danger. Her husband is planning to kill her." I saw the pastor's face become serious. That seriousness of someone who knows it's not an exaggeration, that it's not a common marital fight. "What do you mean, my child? Tell me properly, from the beginning." And I told him. I told him everything. About the wet dirt on the shoes, about the dawn outings, about the hidden shovel, about the insurance questions, about him wanting to send me traveling. I told him about the path in the brush, about the forbidden area, and I told him about what I had seen that dawn, about the grave, about him digging, talking to himself about making me disappear. The more I spoke, the paler the pastor became. He was an older man, must have been about 60 years old at the time, and had seen a lot of bad things in his life, a lot of human misery. But I saw on his face that this had shocked even him. "My God in heaven," he whispered when I finished telling. "My God in heaven, what evil inside a house, inside a marriage." "Pastor, you need to help me," I begged, holding his hand. "I have nowhere to go. I have no one. If I go back to that house, he'll kill me. I know he will. He's waiting for me to come back from the trip to do it. You need to do something, for God's sake." The pastor was silent for a few moments, thinking. I saw when he made the decision. You're going to stay here. Don't leave here for anything. I'm going to the police station right now. I'm going to call the sheriff. I'm going to call witnesses. We'll go to that farm when day breaks, and we'll see that grave with our own eyes. If what you're telling me is true, and I believe it is, that man will be arrested today. But what if he realizes I didn't travel? What if he discovers and destroys the evidence? What if he covers the hole before you get there? There won't be time. He's going to work soon, right? We'll get there when he's at the store. He won't even know what's happening until it's too late. The pastor left that dawn still, left us at his house with his housekeeper, an elderly lady who took care of the parsonage. She made chamomile tea for me and stayed there keeping us company, praying softly, while Judith and I waited. I couldn't stop shaking. Now that I had told everything, now that other people knew, the reality had fallen on me with a horrible weight. My husband wanted to kill me. The man I had married, the man who had sworn to love and protect me in front of God and everyone, had spent weeks digging a grave to bury me alive, or dead, probably dead. How was he going to do it? This question wouldn't leave my head. How exactly was he planning to kill me? Was he going to poison me? Was he going to beat me to death? Was he going to strangle me while I slept? And then he'd drag me to that grave, throw me in there, cover me with dirt, and I'd disappear forever. No one would know where I was. No one would search properly because he'd make up that I had run away, that I had left, that I had abandoned him. Dorothy, drink more tea, Judith said, filling my cup again. You need to calm down. Now everything's going to be okay. The pastor will solve this. But how was everything going to be okay? How was life going to go back to normal after discovering something like this? How was I going to be able to sleep again, trust anyone again? After knowing that the person closest to me wanted to see me dead. We stayed there waiting until the sun started to rise. It must have been around 6 a.m. when the pastor came back, and he didn't come back alone. He brought the town sheriff, a big man named Samuel, and 2 more police officers. He also brought Mr. Augustus, the owner of the store where Ernest worked, and 3 more men from town, respected merchants who would serve as witnesses. Sheriff Samuel came to talk to me, knelt in front of the chair where I was sitting to be at my eye level. Mrs. Dorothy, the pastor told me everything, and you're going to have to repeat the story to me with all the details, because if what you're saying is true, we're talking about premeditated attempted murder. This is very serious. And I told it again, every detail. And he kept asking questions, writing everything in a notebook. How long had it been happening? What time exactly did he leave? What did he take? What had I heard him say? Everything. And you saw this grave with your own eyes? Yes, sir. I saw him inside the hole digging. I saw the size. It's the size of a person lying down. There's no other explanation. Okay, we're going there now. Mr. Augustus already went to the store and sent Ernest to do an errand in another city. It'll take all day for him to come back, so we have time to get there, see everything, and be waiting for him when he gets back. We all left together. Me, Judith, the pastor, the sheriff, the 2 officers, and the men who would serve as witnesses. A whole group walking down the dirt road in the middle of the morning. People who passed by looked curious, but nobody asked anything. In the countryside, everyone knows when something serious is happening. When we got to the farm, my heart was racing again. Seeing that house, that yard, everything that had been my home for 12 years now seemed like a nightmare scene. The sheriff asked Judith and me to show where the path was. It's there in the back, Sheriff, Judith pointed. In that part full of brush, there's a path he opened through the banana trees. And we all went together. I went in front with Judith, and behind came the men. When we got to the entrance of that path, I felt a tightness in my chest. I didn't want to go in there again, didn't want to see that again, but I needed to. I needed them to see. I needed proof. We went down the path, one behind the other. The sheriff kept commenting, observing everything. There really is a path here. Someone passed through here many times. Look, the plants are all crushed, trampled. And look here on the ground, shoe marks, lots of marks. The further we went, the more tense the air became, until we reached the clearing. And there was the grave, the damned grave that Ernest had spent weeks digging. The men stood in silence, looking at it. It was a rectangular hole about 6 feet long, 3 feet wide, and the depth must have been more than 5 feet. The sides were straight, well made, as if someone had measured it exactly, had planned every inch, and the earth around was all loose. There were piles of dirt thrown on the sides, and there was the bucket there, that bucket he used to bring water and wet the earth. The sheriff went to the edge of the grave and looked inside. Then he looked at me. "Mrs. Dorothy, you're right. This here is a grave, and it was dug recently. The earth is still fresh in some places. Someone spent a lot of time working on this. One of the men who had come as a witness, Mr. Daniels, who had a store in town, was white as a sheet. My God in heaven, this here was made to bury a person. There's no other explanation. Look at the size. Look at the depth. This here is a cemetery grave." Pastor Mitchell crossed himself and started praying softly. And I, seeing all that again, now in daylight, with witnesses, with reality hitting head on, I collapsed. I fell to my knees right there and started crying in a way I had never cried in my life, because there was the physical, concrete proof that my husband wanted to kill me. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't exaggeration. It was real, terribly real. Judith knelt beside me and hugged me, and we stayed there, 2 friends crying, embraced at the edge of that grave that had been dug to swallow me. "Okay, we've seen enough," the sheriff said. "Now let's wait for Ernest to come back. Someone stays here on guard so he doesn't destroy the evidence, and the rest come with me to the house. When he arrives, we'll arrest him." They left one of the officers guarding the grave, and the rest of us went back to the house. The sheriff told everyone to wait in the living room, and we stayed there in that heavy silence, waiting for the man who had tried to dig my grave to come home. They were the longest hours of my life. The pastor's housekeeper had brought water, had made coffee, but I couldn't eat or drink anything. I could only sit there, shaking, waiting. It was almost 6 p.m. when we heard the sound of someone arriving, footsteps in the yard, the back door opening, and his voice. "Dorothy, are you back already?" He had come back earlier than planned. He must have been anxious, wanting to check if I had already arrived from the trip. The sheriff signaled for everyone to stay quiet and went to the kitchen. I heard when he said, "Good evening, Ernest. Do you remember me? I'm Sheriff Samuel." Silence, and then Ernest's voice, hesitant, confused. "Sheriff, what are you doing in my house? I need you to come with me to the living room. There are some people here who want to talk to you." I heard their footsteps coming down the hallway, and when Ernest entered the living room and saw me sitting there alive, his face changed. He turned white, his eyes widened, and I saw at that exact moment when he understood, when he realized I hadn't traveled, that I had discovered everything, that everything was lost for him. "Dorothy, you didn't travel?" I couldn't answer. I could only look at him, at that man I thought I knew, and not recognize anything. Nothing about that face was truly familiar to me. The sheriff positioned himself between me and him. "Ernest, we found something interesting in the back of your yard. You want to explain to me what that is?" I saw the color completely drain from his face. I saw when he tried to think of some excuse, some lie. I don't know what you're talking about." "You don't know? Then come with me. Let's go there. And you explain to me that huge hole that's dug in the middle of the brush, that hole the size of a person." Ernest started to sweat. Drops of sweat running down his forehead, down his temples, his hands shaking. "I can explain. That was for what, Ernest?" To bury your wife." And at that moment, something broke in him. Maybe it was seeing there were too many witnesses, that there was the sheriff, the pastor, the respected men from town, all there looking at him with disgust. Or maybe it was seeing there was no way to lie, to make up an excuse for that. There was no innocent explanation for a grave like that. He collapsed, literally collapsed, falling to his knees on the floor right there in the living room, and started crying. And when he started talking, when he started confessing, it was worse than I imagined. Much worse. "I needed the money," he said between sobs. "I needed it so bad. I have another family. I have another woman and 3 children in Lexington. She doesn't know about you. You don't know about her. I'm maintaining 2 households, 2 lives, and it's not working anymore. I don't have money to support everything. And when I found out Dorothy had that inheritance, that insurance, that saved money, I thought it was the solution. If she disappeared, if she died and no one found the body, after a while, I could declare her as missing, keep the money, sell the farm, and start over somewhere else, with the other family, the family I really want." Hearing that was like taking a knife to the chest. He had another family, 3 children, another woman. Everything I hadn't been able to give him, this other woman had given. And for that, I had to die. I had to disappear so he could live the life he really wanted. "And how were you going to do it?" the sheriff asked with a hard voice. "How exactly were you going to kill your wife?" Ernest stayed quiet, but the sheriff insisted. "Talk. You already confessed everything. Now say the rest." I was going to put poison in her food, rat poison. When she came back from the trip, I was going to make a special dinner. I was going to say I missed her, put the poison in the food. She'd eat, get sick during the night, and die. Then I'd wait until dawn, carry the body to the grave, bury it, cover it well with dirt, and plant some things on top to disguise it. In the morning, I'd wake up, pretending she had disappeared, look for her, and report that she had vanished. No one would ever find the body. And after a while, I'd leave, saying I couldn't stand being in a place that reminded me of her. The silence that fell in the room after that confession was deathly. All the men there were looking at Ernest with a mixture of disgust and horror. And I was sitting there, hearing the man who had shared my bed for 12 years, describing in detail how he was going to murder me and bury me like a dead dog in the back of the yard. "And the poison? Did you already buy the poison?" the sheriff asked. Ernest nodded, crying. "It's hidden in the chicken coop inside an old paint can." The sheriff sent one of the officers to get it, and when he came back with the can, he opened it, and inside there was a package of rat poison, arsenic, enough to kill several people. "You were going to use all this in her food?" "I was. I wanted to make sure it would work, that it would be quick." Quick. He wanted my death to be quick. How kind of him, right? How considerate. Sheriff Samuel turned to the officers. "Arrest this man. Premeditated attempted murder. And when we investigate properly, I bet we'll find more things. Bigamy, false identity, God knows what else." The officers put handcuffs on Ernest, and he didn't even resist, just kept crying, his head down, defeated. And when they were taking him out, he stopped in front of me. "Dorothy, forgive me. Please forgive me." I looked at him. At that man I had loved, or thought I loved. At that man I had served, cared for, respected, and felt nothing. Not anger, not hate, not sadness. I felt nothing, just an enormous emptiness. "I have nothing to forgive you for, Ernest, because you're already dead to me. You died the day you picked up that shovel and started digging my grave." And they took him away, took him arrested, handcuffed, destroyed. And I stayed there in that house that had been my prison, alive, but completely shattered inside. Pastor Mitchell came to me and put his hand on my shoulder. "You were very brave, my child, very brave. You saved your own life." But I didn't feel brave. I felt empty, lost. Because even having survived, even having discovered in time, a part of me had died that day. The part that still believed in love, the part that still trusted people, the part that still thought the world was a safe place. That part of me had been buried in that grave, along with the 12 years of marriage I thought had meant something. After they took Ernest away arrested, I stayed in that house for a few more days. Not because I wanted to, but because I had nowhere to go at that moment. Judith offered her house. The pastor offered that I stay at the parsonage, but I refused. I needed to stay there in that house and face it. Face each room, each memory, each piece of that place that had been the scene of my near death. The first nights, I couldn't sleep in that bed. I couldn't lie down in the place where I had shared the mattress with a man who planned to kill me. So I slept in the living room on an old mattress I put on the floor with all the doors locked, with a kitchen knife under the pillow. Even knowing he was arrested, even knowing he couldn't hurt me, my body didn't understand that. My body was still on alert, waiting for danger. The news of what had happened spread through the entire town in a matter of days. In the countryside, news flies. And news like that, then, you can't even talk about. Everyone was commenting. At the store, at church, in the town square, everywhere, people were talking about Ernest, who had dug a grave to kill his own wife. Some people came to the farm, curious, wanting to see the grave with their own eyes. I had to ask the sheriff to send someone to close off that area because it had become a kind of morbid attraction. The criminal trial started quickly. Sheriff Samuel was very efficient. He gathered all the evidence, all the testimonies. There was the grave, there was the poison, there was his confession, there were the witnesses who had seen everything. And when they investigated his life properly, they discovered things even I didn't know. The other family in Lexington was real. He had married that woman 8 years ago in civil court using false documents. He had 3 children with her, the oldest being 7 years old. In other words, he had started that second life when he was still married to me just 4 years in. The woman there, when she found out he had another wife, that he had lied about everything, was devastated. She thought she was married to a hard-working, honest man who traveled a lot for work. She didn't know he had a whole other life here, that he spent half the week with me and half with her, that we were 2 women deceived by the same man. The trial happened 4 months after his arrest. It was in December 1962. I had to go to court. I had to sit in that chair and tell everything again in front of everyone, in front of him. And when I looked at him there, sitting in the defendant's bench, handcuffed, in that prisoner's uniform, he seemed smaller. He seemed like a broken man, destroyed. And even after everything he had done, even after planning my murder, I didn't feel satisfaction seeing him like that. I just felt a deep sadness, a sadness for everything that could have been and wasn't. The judge sentenced him to 20 years in prison. 20 years for qualified attempted murder, for bigamy, for fraud. When the sentence was read, he didn't react, just lowered his head and accepted it. And I, sitting there in the gallery with Judith by my side, breathed deeply for the first time in months, because even knowing he was going to be imprisoned, part of me was afraid they would get a lighter sentence, that he'd get out, that he'd come back. But he didn't come back. He was transferred to a penitentiary in Nashville, and I never saw him in person again. I found out years later, through the lawyer who handled the divorce, that he had died in prison. It was in 1971, 9 years after being arrested. They said it was his heart, a heart attack. He was 55 years old, and when I found out, when I got the news, I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief either. I just felt that that chapter, that entire book of my life had finally closed. But going back to those first months after his arrest, I needed to make decisions about my life. I couldn't stay on that farm. I couldn't keep living in a place where I had almost been murdered, where there was a grave dug for me in the back of the yard. So I decided to sell. I put the farm up for sale in January 1963, and by March, a buyer had already appeared, a young couple starting their life, who didn't know the whole story, who just wanted a place to live and farm. I didn't tell them about the grave.